Hello. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about rakugo, which is a Japanese tradition, and which was conceived in the 9th to 10th century by Buddhist monks, and basically it came into creation because the monks needed more effective ways to tell their sermons, which needed to be more humorous. And obviously, at the time, most people seemed to get bored from the usual way of telling sermons and stories and all those morals and whatnot. So it was a way to captivate the audience in a more unique way and more interesting way. So initially it was known as Karukuchi, but then its name changed to Rakugo, which literally means the falling word in Japanese. And that is going to be the aim of one of the main performance convention I'm going to look at, which is the Ochi, which is basically the falling word. So, however, despite its inception in the 9th to 10th century, there are not many known creators of the art, apart from a few contributors that wrote stories in the Uji Chui Monogatari, which was created in the 12th century, which is basically a book of all kinds of Japanese stories, and mainly lots of monks recycled stories, so there wasn't really any sort of plagiarism, if I can call it that. And at the time, it wasn't really a serious thing, so everyone could borrow stories, they could add a few elements, and the stories are never told the exact same way every time. So no one could really take ownership for the stories, and it was written basically so long ago that no one really knows who created it. But yeah, all that is known is that it was Buddhist monks. But however, during the time, around the world, during the time of its inception, it was around the Viking Age, the Anglo-Saxon War, and it was within the same century as the time Beowulf, the story was written. But in Japan, this was the Edo period, where there were lots of warlords and shoguns who basically needed entertainment and needed something, I don't know, different, as opposed to the usual having actors act out whatever it is, and yeah, they needed something different. So the story, and after a while, Japan during the time had lots of interaction with other places, and so lots of merchants came and settled into Japan, and it created a need for more pastime because there was more wealth in the country, and so more leisure time was needed, more pastimes were needed, even for the general population. So that's the history, and for the performance convention, like I mentioned, Rakugo literally means the falling word, which is derived from the Ochi, and other than the Ochi, there are other performance conventions like the Sensui, which is a paper fan, which could be used to indicate a female narrator, a female character's role, because in Japan lots of females at the time had fans. And one other convention is the Tengui, which is basically a small cloth on which the Rakuga, who is the narrator, the tengui is a cloth on which the rakugo kneels as they tell the story. So throughout the most parts of the story, the rakugoka kneels on a mat and tells the story, narrates it, and yeah. So at this point in time, I am going to be a rakugoka and give you a story, and basically the convention I chose was the ochi, which is the falling word, which is derived from where rakugo derives from, and I would like you to pay attention to the way in which I deliver the stories, and the lines of the story, and basically, as opposed to giving a traditional Japanese story, which might be somewhat complicated to understand for me and possibly for you, I found it easier to tell a story, some traditional or some old stories I was told as a kid. So yeah, I shall begin now. Once upon a time, there was a rabbit and a hyena. And the rabbit was always smarter. The rabbit needed to get to go and serve the chief. And can I start the story again? Okay.
Time's going.
Okay, so the chief had a princess, and the princess needed a husband. She was of age, and many people in the village were trying to aspire to be the princess's new husband. But many of them failed, and the task to be the husband was to qualify to be the husband was they had to drink they had to drink boiling water, and the man who would drink the boiling water would in turn qualify as the husband. So the hyena went to the chief's hut, and then he tried to sip some, of which he later on got burned, and tried to sip again, got burned again, until he gave up. And after that, the tortoise came in, and the tortoise tried the same thing, sipped, got burned, sipped, got burned again, and before long the tortoise died, and yeah. And then the princess then began to lose hope into the whole situation of the sipping of boiling water. And before long, the rabbit came into the picture and got the boiling water. And at this point in time, there were basically the entire village was there waiting to see who would become the potential new chief after marrying the princess. And before long, the rabbit came, was given the pot filled with boiling water, and he went around, showed everyone, he went around. At this point in time, I'm going to take the role of the rabbit. Yeah. Do you see this boiling water? Can you tell that it's boiling water? Yes. You see it, right? Okay. This is boiling water, right? You see it's boiling, right? Yes. I'm going to drink it. This is boiling water. You see it, right? I'm going to drink it. And the rabbit did this until everyone saw that it was boiling water. And by the time he got to the last person, he then drank it. And he drank the entire thing. And before long, he finished it and he became the princess. And basically, the rabbit, like I mentioned earlier, the rabbit was the smarter one as opposed to hyena, because he went around and made sure everyone saw it. And at that time, as that was happening, the water then began to cool down, by which by the time it got to the last person, it was cold and it was drinkable. So that's, if you notice, there were points in which I increased the tone of my voice and began to speak at a lower tone and slowed down my speech, and that's basically the Ochi. So how I explored this, I gave okay, how I explored this, I basically tried it with, I performed it in front of my brother, who I figured wasn't the best person because he didn't really need, despite me explaining what exactly I was doing, he wasn't really the best person, because I think he might not really have wanted to hurt my feelings. So he might have just made it seem like, ah, no, everything's good, I'm okay. But yeah, I also, before that, I watched a couple of videos which were provided to me by my teacher, who gave a whole bunch of resources on all the conventions, on all the traditions, and also I looked at the videos because it would be the most, I believed a video of an actual performance would be one of the best ways, if not the best way, to have an idea of what I need to do and try to emulate that performance. I also, apart from that, I also read an article from Professor Karuguchi, who basically is he's a professor in the arts of traditional Japanese, something I forgot, but basically he wrote an article on on Rakugo specifically, and what elements make Rakugo, and he looked at for one of his primary sources, he went to an actual Rakugo play, and he since he studies Rakugo and other Japanese forms, he looked at what they needed to be done, what should have been done, what was done correctly, and basically most of the things that were done correctly were things like the delivery of the stories, but he went to multiple ones, and he noted that he went to multiple ones and noted that the variations of the stories were still not as different as they needed to be, because I don't know, maybe the Rakugoka needed to keep it to the central elements of the storytelling, but you can only deviate so far, basically. And apart from that, I looked at the Encyclopedia of Asian Theatre, and yeah. Yeah, so my teacher suggested me looking at vocal exercises, but basically I did not feel this was quite needed because I do make music as a pastime, and basically I rap basically, and basically when rapping, there are points in which there are moments when the delivery changes, the way you say the words change, and yeah. And usually at the end of a line or a punch line where the beat hits, yeah, the delivery is similar to the one before, so it was a lot like the delivery of the Ochi. And yeah. And the impact on me as a performer, it helped me realize the interconnectivity of lots of art forms, because basically apart from Rakugo, there is Bunraku in Japan, which has narrators as well, who also variate in the delivery of the lines, make them faster, make them louder, and also the fact that I implemented a skill of rapping into this, but maybe I could have practiced it more, or maybe made it slightly more. I needed to have practiced it more to make it more clear that the points of my tone dropping, of the volume dropping, yeah. But yeah, then that was Rakugo.